The silver tray rattled in her hands, but Elizabeth wasn't cold. She was terrified. She had just done the unthinkable, crossing a line that was invisible yet stronger than steel. The woman standing before her, the heiress to the entire fortune, was trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. The kiss had been brief, stolen in the silence of the grand library, but it was enough to shatter the world. This is the moment when a simple mistake, a flicker of emotion, can cost you everything. It is the universal pain of wanting something you cannot have, of being trapped by the circumstances of your birth. We all know what it's like to be on the outside, looking in at a life we desire, knowing that one wrong move could send us falling. Elizabeth, a poor maid, had spent her life being invisible, until the day the heiress Claire truly saw her. That one moment of connection, of shared loneliness, changed everything. And now the library door was opening. This is the story of what happens when a forbidden love is discovered, and how the reaction was not what anyone expected. We promise to show you exactly what the rich mother did, a reaction so shocking it sent ripples through the entire mansion. To help us bring more stories to you, please take a moment to like this video. It also helps us to know who is listening, so please comment with your name and the city you are watching from. And if you are new, subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a new story. Now let's begin. The Blackwood Mansion was not a home. It was a fortress of wealth, a museum of silence. Its halls were wide and cold, an echo chamber for the unspoken rules that governed everyone within. Elizabeth had worked there for 6 months, and in that time she had mastered the art of being invisible. She was a ghost in a blue uniform, dusting furniture that was never used, cleaning windows that looked out onto gardens no one walked in. She was the definition of a poor maid, quiet, efficient, and forgettable. That was until Claire. Claire was the opposite of the house. She was a flicker of warmth in the cold, a whisper of life in the silence. She was the heiress, the daughter of the formidable Carol Blackwood, and she was in every way a prisoner. Elizabeth had seen it from her first day. While the rest of the staff scurried away from the family, Claire seemed to seek out the forgotten corners of the house, just as Elizabeth did. Their paths crossed often. In the conservatory, where Claire would read poetry. In the music room, where she would sit at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, never daring to make a sound. Elizabeth's duties were simple. Clean, stay quiet, and never, ever engage the family. But Claire had engaged her. It started with a simple hello, a word so rare from the family that Elizabeth had nearly dropped her duster. Then it became questions. "What are you reading?" Claire had asked one afternoon, finding Elizabeth on a rare break with a worn paperback. It had blossomed from there into quiet conversations shared over dusting shelves or polishing silver. They spoke of books, of the world outside the high stone walls of the mansion, of feeling trapped. That afternoon, the air in the mansion was heavier than usual. A storm was brewing outside, and the sky was a deep, bruised purple. Elizabeth was in the library, tasked with sorting a collection of leather-bound books that had arrived for Carol. The library was the one room Elizabeth truly loved. It smelled of old paper and leather, a scent of history and escape. She was running her hand over a particularly beautiful binding when Claire slipped in. "Hiding?" Claire asked, her voice soft. Elizabeth jumped, a small gasp escaping her. "Miss Claire. I'm sorry. I was just sorting." "I'm the one hiding," Claire said, walking further into the room. She was wearing a simple silk dress that seemed to float around her. She looked pale. "My mother is entertaining, and the noise, it's too much." She gestured vaguely toward the east wing, where the distant murmur of a party could be faintly heard. "She has many guests today," Elizabeth said, returning to the books. Her hands were unsteady. She was always unsteady around Claire. "They're not guests. They're associates. They're all the same," Claire sighed. She walked over to the tall windows, looking out at the darkening garden. "They look at me like I'm a prize to be auctioned off. Another one of my mother's assets." Elizabeth stopped her work. She watched Claire's reflection in the dark glass. The loneliness radiating from the heiress was a physical thing, a mirror of the same loneliness Elizabeth felt. "You are more than that, Mississippi." Claire turned, her eyes finding Elizabeth's. The library was vast, but suddenly it felt small, intimate. "You're the only one who sees that. The only one who talks to me like I'm a person, not a porcelain doll." She took a step closer. Elizabeth's heart began to hammer against her ribs. This was the line. The invisible, steel-enforced line. She was the maid. Claire was the heiress. She should look down, murmur an excuse and leave the room. But she didn't. She couldn't. "You are a person," Elizabeth whispered. "A kind one." Claire was only inches away now. The air between them was electric, charged with the storm outside and the tension within. "Elizabeth," Claire breathed, her name sounding like a prayer. "I'm so tired of being alone." "I know," Elizabeth said, her own voice trembling. It was Claire who moved first. She closed the small distance, her hand coming up to cup Elizabeth's cheek. Elizabeth's skin tingled at the touch. It was soft, hesitant. This was wrong. This was dangerous. This could cost her the only job she had, the roof over her head. But as Claire's eyes searched hers, filled with a desperate, pleading vulnerability, Elizabeth found she didn't care. Claire leaned in slowly, giving Elizabeth every chance to pull away. But Elizabeth was rooted to the spot, caught in the gravity of the moment. And then their lips met. It was not a long kiss. It was hesitant, soft, and tasted of salt, though Elizabeth wasn't sure whose tears they were. It was a kiss of shared solitude, a desperate reach for connection in a world that kept them apart. It was a spark in a tinderbox. They pulled apart at the exact same moment, the reality of what they had done crashing down on them. Elizabeth's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. Claire looked equally stunned, her face flushed. I'm sorry," Claire stammered. "No, Elizabeth began. But the words died in her throat. A sound from the doorway. A sharp, distinct click of a heel on the polished hardwood floor. They both froze, turning their heads in sync. Standing in the grand archway of the library, framed by the dark wood, was Carol Blackwood. Her face was a perfect cold mask. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent, moved from her daughter's flushed face to the maid's terrified one. The silence that followed was louder than any storm. It was the silence of judgment, the silence of ruin. "What," Carol said, her voice cutting through the tension like a shard of ice, "is the meaning of this?" The air in the library solidified. Elizabeth felt the blood drain from her face, leaving her skin cold and clammy. The silver tray she had forgotten she was holding was now shaking violently, the crystal glasses on it rattling a frantic rhythm against the silence. This was it. This was the end of her job, the end of her security. She would be thrown out, labeled, and blacklisted from every great house in the state. She stared at the expensive rug, unable to meet the cold gaze of the mansion's matriarch. Claire, however, surprised her. She took a half step forward, partially shielding Elizabeth from her mother's view. Her fear was visible, but it was mixed with a defiant tremor. "Mother," she said, her voice strained. "We were just talking." Carol's eyes narrowed. She was a woman who had built an empire, a woman who could detect a lie as easily as she could spot a flaw in a balance sheet. Her gaze lingered on her daughter for a long moment before shifting back to Elizabeth. It was a look of such intensity, of such cold calculation, that Elizabeth felt pinned to the spot. "Elizabeth," Carol said, her voice dangerously calm. "You were not hired to talk with my daughter. You were hired to clean. You have fingerprints all over the silver. Fix it. Then return to the kitchen and wait for me." "Yes, ma'am," Elizabeth whispered, her voice barely audible. She curtsied, her knees weak, and quickly turned to the tray, polishing a spot with her apron. She didn't dare look at Claire. She could feel the heiress's eyes on her, but the mother's command was absolute. "And Claire," Carol continued, her tone shifting slightly, "I study. Now." Elizabeth fled. She didn't walk, she scurried from the library like a frightened mouse, her heart pounding a desperate, painful beat. She didn't hear Claire's response. She just needed to be away, to escape the crushing weight of Carol's disapproval. She half ran down the long corridor, past the priceless tapestries and the portraits of grim-faced ancestors, all of whom seemed to be watching her with scorn. The staff kitchen was a flurry of activity, a stark contrast to the rest of the house. Here people bustled and shouted, and the air was thick with the smell of roasting meat for the party. Elizabeth slipped into a forgotten corner, her back against the cool tiles, and tried to breathe. The whispers started almost immediately. The whole mansion was not just the building. It was the network of staff who saw everything. A footman, Thomas, had been passing the library on his way to the party. He had seen the confrontation. He had seen the look on Carol's face. She caught them, he whispered to the head cook. The maid and the heiress. In the library. The cook dropped a ladle. No, not the new girl. She seemed so quiet. Quiet ones are always the ones to watch, muttered Martha, the head housekeeper. Martha was a stern woman who had never liked Elizabeth's quiet presence. Thinks she can just waltz in here and charm her way to the top. I knew she was trouble. Elizabeth sank lower, wishing the floor would swallow her. Every minute that ticked by felt like an hour. She was waiting for the summons, for Martha to come over and tell her to pack her bags and be gone by nightfall. An hour passed. Then the party noises in the east wing grew louder, then softer as guests began to depart. Elizabeth just waited, her hands raw from scrubbing a pot that was already clean. Finally, the kitchen door swung open. But it wasn't Martha. It was Carol. The entire kitchen staff froze. Carol Blackwood never came to the kitchens. She was a creature of the upstairs, of boardrooms and studies. Her presence here was an event, a terrifying anomaly. She scanned the room, her eyes instantly finding Elizabeth in the corner. My study. Elizabeth's legs felt like lead. This was it. The public humiliation followed by the private dismissal. She wiped her hands on her apron and followed the matriarch out of the kitchen, the silence of the other staff a heavy weight on her back. They walked the endless hallways, their footsteps the only sound. Carol didn't speak. She just led the way to the imposing oak doors of her study. She opened the door and gestured for Elizabeth to enter. The study was dark, smelling of mahogany and old money. Claire was not there. It was just the two of them. Sit, Carol said, pointing to a small hard-backed chair opposite her massive desk. Elizabeth sat, perching on the very edge. Carol sat in her large leather chair, steepling her fingers. She stared at Elizabeth, her expression unreadable. She said nothing for a full minute, letting the tension build until Elizabeth felt she might scream. You are a poor girl, Elizabeth, Carol stated. It wasn't a question. You come from nothing. You have nothing. Ma'am, Do not speak, Carol interrupted, holding up a hand. I am assessing. You have a menial job in my house. My daughter, on the other hand, is an heiress. She is the key to a future I have meticulously planned. She is set to be engaged to the son of a very important business partner. An engagement that will secure our family's legacy for another generation. He paused, leaning forward. And you, a maid, have kissed her. Elizabeth flinched. I didn't mean. It won't happen again, ma'am. I swear it. Please don't fire me. I need this job. Carol watched her, a strange, calculating light in her eyes. The reaction Elizabeth expected, the shouting, the rage, the immediate dismissal, was absent. This cold, analytical calm was far more terrifying. Fire you, Carol said almost to herself. That would be the conventional solution. That is what everyone in this house expects. Martha is already preparing your severance, I'm sure. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out into the night. But Claire, she is defiant. Firing you would make you a martyr. It would make her hate me. And a hateful daughter is a difficult asset to manage. Carol turned back and a thin, unsettling smile touched her lips. It did not reach her eyes. So no, Elizabeth. I am not going to fire you. Elizabeth's head snapped up, her mind reeling in confusion. Ma'am. You will, however, no longer be cleaning. Your duties are changing. This was the shock. This was the moment that would stun the mansion. This was not anger. It was not forgiveness. It was something else entirely. From now on, Carol said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, you will be my daughter's companion. You will spend time with her. You will talk with her. You will continue, whatever this thing is between you. Elizabeth was dumbfounded. I don't understand. It's very simple, Carol said, walking back to her desk. You will be her friend, her closest friend, and in exchange you will report everything to me. Every mood, every secret, every rebellious thought. You will be my eyes and my ears. You want me to spy on her? Elizabeth whispered, horrified. I want you to help me guide her. She's young, emotional. You are poor. You are practical. You understand consequences. She opened a desk drawer and pulled out an envelope, sliding it across the polished wood. This is your first payment. Consider it a promotion. Elizabeth stared at the thick envelope. It likely contained more money than she earned in a month. This is the reaction that shocked everyone. Not the firing. Not the rage. But the promotion. The acceptance. This is where the true story begins. And if I refuse? Elizabeth asked, her voice small. Carol's smile vanished. Then you will be fired. And I will make sure you not only never work in this state again, but I will also see to it that the small apartment your aging mother lives in is suddenly unavailable. Do you understand the consequences now, Elizabeth? The choice was not a choice. It was a cage. Elizabeth looked at the envelope, then at the cold, powerful woman before her. She was trapped. She had kissed the heiress, and instead of being cast out, she was being pulled deeper into the darkness of the Blackwood family. Yes, Moll, Elizabeth said, her hand trembling as it reached for the envelope. I understand. The next morning the whole mansion was buzzing. The rumors had flown all night, and the staff had gathered in the kitchen for breakfast with a palpable sense of anticipation. They were all waiting for Martha, the head housekeeper, to announce that Elizabeth had been thrown out into the street. They pictured her walking down the long gravel driveway, suitcase in hand, a cautionary tale. Instead, Martha swept into the kitchen, her face a mask of thunderous disbelief. She slammed the coffee pot down. She's been moved, Martha announced to the room. The kitchen fell silent. Moved where? Asked the head cook. To the guest wing. East-facing. By her orders. It was always capitalized when the staff spoke of Carol. She's no longer on the cleaning rotation. She's been assigned as Miss Clare's personal companion. A collective gasp went through the room. This was the reaction that shocked them. It was not anger. It was the opposite. It was an endorsement. The poor maid who had crossed the ultimate line had not been punished. She had been rewarded. The footman, Thomas, looked bewildered. The other maids looked jealous. Elizabeth, in their eyes, had successfully played a very dangerous game and won. But for Elizabeth it was not a victory. It was the beginning of a nightmare. Her small, sparse room in the servants' quarters was gone. In its place, she was given a beautiful, luxurious room with a soft bed and silk curtains. It was a gilded cage. Her new uniform arrived an hour later. No more practical blue cotton. It was a series of simple, elegant dresses in muted colors. The kind a distant, poor cousin might wear. She was being remade, rebranded. Claire found her just before lunch. Elizabeth was standing in the middle of her new room, clutching the soft fabric of a gray wool dress, when the door opened. Claire rushed in, her eyes bright. Elizabeth, you're still here. She threw her arms around Elizabeth, hugging her tightly. Elizabeth stiff underneath, her body rigid with guilt. The money from the envelope was hidden beneath her mattress, a heavy, burning secret. Miss Clare. Please call me Claire, the heiress insisted, pulling back. My mother told me. She said she understands, that she wants me to be happy. She said she was giving you to me as my companion so we wouldn't have to hide. Claire's face was alight with a joy and relief that made Elizabeth's stomach twist. The heiress, so desperate for her mother's approval, had completely misread the situation. She saw this as acceptance. Elizabeth knew it was manipulation. She did. Elizabeth managed to say, yes. She said you'll be joining us for lessons, for walks. Everything. Oh, Elizabeth, isn't it wonderful? We don't have to be afraid. Yes, Claire, Elizabeth said, her voice hollow. It's wonderful. The first few days were a strange, surreal performance. Elizabeth played her part. She walked with Claire in the gardens, she listened as Claire read her poetry, she sat with her in the music room. And Claire, starved for genuine connection, blossomed. She laughed, a sound Elizabeth had never heard from her. She shared her dreams, her fears, her frustrations with her mother's controlling nature. She's been planning my engagement to Daniel since we were children, Claire confessed one afternoon as they sat by the lake. He's not a bad person, just boring. He's like a piece of polished wood. He's only interested in the merger. He doesn't see me. And, what do you want? Elizabeth asked, her heart aching. This was the exact kind of information Carol wanted. I want to travel, Claire said, her eyes distant. I want to see Paris. I want to study art. I want to be with you. She turned and took Elizabeth's hand. Her touch was warm. I've never felt this way about anyone, Elizabeth. I know it's fast, but when we kissed, it felt right. It felt like I could finally breathe. Elizabeth's throat tightened. The guilt was a physical weight. Here was Claire, offering her pure, honest heart, and Elizabeth was a spy, a traitor paid in blood money. She wanted to confess. She wanted to tell Claire the truth, that her mother was a monster, that this was all a game. But she couldn't. The thought of her own mother, frail and sick, being tossed from her home kept her silent. That evening she reported to Carol's study. "She is happy," Elizabeth said, standing stiffly before the desk. "She believes you've accepted us." "Good," Carol said, not looking up from her paperwork. "Her mood has improved, her appetite is better. The staff has noticed. A happy heiress is a compliant heiress." She spoke of the engagement, Elizabeth forced herself to say. "To Daniel." Carol's pen stopped moving. She looked up. "And she doesn't want it. He says he is boring. She says she wants to be with me." A flicker of something, annoyance, satisfaction, crossed Carol's face. "Of course she does. You are new. You are forbidden. You are a distraction. That is your purpose." "My purpose?" Her engagement to Daniel is not negotiable. It is the cornerstone of a multi-billion-dollar deal. She will go through with it. But right now she is rebellious. She needs to feel like she has some control, some secret victory. Carol leaned back in her chair. "You, Elizabeth, are her secret victory. You will keep her occupied. You will keep her stable. You will make her believe she has an ally while I secure her future. So you're just letting her be with me? Until the wedding?" Elizabeth asked, disgusted. "Prissy belly. And when the time is right, you will be the one to end it. You will break her heart. You will tell her it was all a lie, that you were just using her for money. And she, devastated, will run back to me. She will marry Daniel and my plans will be complete." Elizabeth felt sick. This was the betrayal. It wasn't just a lesbian betrayal. It was a betrayal of trust, of love, of basic human decency. Carol was not just manipulating her daughter. She was planning to emotionally destroy her, using Elizabeth as the weapon. "You're a monster," Elizabeth whispered, unable to stop the words. Carol's face hardened. "I am a realist. And you are a paid participant. Do not forget that." She slid another envelope across the desk. "For your good work." Elizabeth stared at the envelope. It was thicker this time. "Now," Carol said, her voice brisk, "tomorrow Daniel's family is coming for dinner. I need to know Claire's mindset. Is she planning to make a scene?" Elizabeth's mind was spinning. She was trapped in a play where she was the lead villain, and the heroine had no idea. She was falling for Claire, for her kindness, her vulnerability. And she was being paid to arrange her ruin. "She will be resistant," Elizabeth said, her voice numb. "Then your new job, companion," Carol said with a sneer, "is to make sure she is not." Elizabeth took the money, the weight of it sealing her fate. She was now, officially, a traitor, bound to the rich mother by a shared, dark secret. The mansion was transformed. The oppressive silence was replaced by a frantic, high-strung energy. Extra staff were brought in, floors were polished to a mirror shine, and enough flowers were delivered to fill a botanical garden. The dinner with Daniel's family was not just a meal, it was a summit. Claire was a nervous wreck. She had hidden in her room all morning, and Elizabeth, in her new role as companion, was sent to fetch her. "I can't do it, Elizabeth," Claire said, pacing the floor of her lavish bedroom. She was still in her silk robe, her hair uncombed. "I can't sit there and smile at him. I can't pretend to be this offering." Elizabeth's heart ached for her. This was the moment Carol had warned her about. Her instructions were clear: make sure she is compliant. "Claire, you have to," Elizabeth said, her voice softer than she intended. Claire stopped pacing and looked at her, her eyes wide with betrayal. "You're supposed to be on my side. You of all people." "I am on your side," Elizabeth insisted, walking over to her. "That's why I'm telling you this. Your mother. If you make a scene, she won't just be angry with you. She'll be angry with me. She'll say I've been a bad influence. She'll send me away." It was a manipulation, a cruel twisting of the truth, and Elizabeth hated herself for it. But it was the only thing she could think of. She was using Claire's affection for her as a weapon, just as Carol was using her. Claire's face fell. "She wouldn't," she said. She said she wants you to be happy, Elizabeth cut in, her voice desperate. But she's still your mother. She still controls everything. Please, Claire. Just get through tonight. For me. Smile at Daniel, be polite. We can be together later. We can talk about Paris. The mention of Paris, their shared secret dream, seemed to work. Claire's shoulders slumped. Just for you, she whispered. I'll do it for you. Thank you, Elizabeth said, the words tasting like ash. The dinner was an agonizing spectacle. Elizabeth was not permitted at the table, of course. She was relegated to the shadows, standing near the doorway with the other senior staff, ready to assist Claire if she needed anything. From her vantage point she could see it all. Daniel was exactly as Claire had described, polished, handsome in a boring way and utterly devoid of warmth. He spoke to Claire about stock prices and sailing. Claire, true to her word, smiled politely, a perfect porcelain doll. Carol was in her element, presiding over the table like a queen. She was charming, witty, and completely in control. She directed the conversation, guiding it toward the future alliance of their two families. Claire has been in such good spirits lately, Carol said, smiling at her daughter. She's been spending time in the gardens, reading. She seems for the first time truly content. Daniel's father, a man who looked just like an older version of his son, nodded approvingly. Excellent. A stable temperament is a fine quality in a wife. Elizabeth had to suppress a gag. From the shadows, Elizabeth watched the performance, but she also felt other eyes on her. Martha, the head housekeeper, was watching her. Martha's gaze was not jealous anymore. It was cold, suspicious, and filled with contempt. Martha had seen Elizabeth and Carol in their hushed meetings. She had seen the envelopes passed. She knew Elizabeth was not a lover, she was a spy. The dinner dragged on. Course after course was served. Elizabeth's feet ached, but her heart ached more. She watched Claire, so trapped and so alone, putting on a brave face for her. After dinner, the men retired to the study for cigars and business, while the women were meant to move to the drawing room for coffee. This was the moment. Mother, Claire said, her voice clear and carrying in the hallway. I have a headache. I think I'll retire early. Carol's smile tightened. Nonsense, darling. You'll join us. No, Claire said. It was a simple word, but it was laden with defiance. I'm tired. Elizabeth will walk me to my room. She didn't wait for an answer. She turned and walked straight to Elizabeth, grabbed her hand in full view of her mother and Daniel's family, and pulled her toward the grand staircase. Claire, you can't. Elizabeth hissed, trying to pull her hand away. I just did, Claire said, her grip tightening. The gasp from Daniel's mother was audible. Carol's face was unreadable, a mask of cold fury. Martha, standing in the doorway, looked horrified. The whole mansion was witnessing a direct rebellion. Claire pulled Elizabeth up the stairs, not stopping until they were in the safety of her bedroom. She slammed the door and leaned against it, breathing heavily, a wild, triumphant look in her eyes. Did you see her face? Claire laughed, a sound that was half joy, half hysteria. Claire, you're in so much trouble, Elizabeth said, shaking. Your mother will be furious. Let her be, Claire said, walking toward her. I don't care. I did what she wanted. I sat through dinner. I smiled. But the night is mine. It's ours. She took Elizabeth's face in her hands. I'm so tired of pretending, Elizabeth. I don't want to smile at him. I want to be with you. She kissed her. This kiss was not like the first one. It was not hesitant or shy. It was desperate, hungry, acclaiming. Elizabeth, caught in the moment, overwhelmed by guilt and a confusing surge of her own desire, kissed her back. All the tension of the night, all the self-loathing, melted away into the simple physical truth of Claire's embrace. They broke apart, gasping. I love you, Claire whispered, her forehead resting against Elizabeth's. I don't care what my mother says. I love you. The words hit Elizabeth like a physical blow. Knock, knock, knock. A sharp, imperious rap on the door. Claire, Carol's voice, cold as the grave, came from the other side. Open this door. No. And you, Elizabeth, will go to my study. We need to talk. Claire's face went white. The defiance evaporated, replaced by the familiar fear. Elizabeth looked at the door, then back at Claire. The trap was sprung. The performance was over. She had failed her mission to keep Claire compliant and now she would face the consequences. But worse, Claire had declared her love, and Elizabeth knew she was about to be ordered to destroy it. The walk to Carol's study was the longest walk of Elizabeth's life. The mansion, which had been buzzing with the dinner party, was now tomb silent. The guests were gone. The only sound was the click of Elizabeth's sensible shoes on the marble floor, a sound that seemed to echo her guilt. She knocked on the oak door. Enter. Carol was not at her desk. She was standing by the fireplace, a small glass of dark liquid in her hand. The fire was not lit and the room was cold. You failed, Carol said. It was not an accusation. It was a flat statement of fact. She was upset, Elizabeth stammered. I tried to keep her calm, but... You did not try hard enough, Carol snapped, turning to face her. Her eyes were chips of ice. You let her make a scene. You let her embarrass me in front of the Hamiltons. Do you have any idea the damage you have done? It was just holding my hand, Elizabeth whispered. It was a declaration of war, Carol countered. She was marking her territory. She was claiming you, a maid, over him, a multi-billion-dollar merger. It was a catastrophic miscalculation. I'm sorry, ma'am. Sorry will not fix this. The Hamiltons are concerned. They believe Claire is unstable. And it is all your fault. Carol took a sip of her drink, studying Elizabeth over the rim of the glass. I thought you were a practical girl, Elizabeth. I thought you understood the stakes. I am paying you a small fortune to manage my daughter, and instead, you are encouraging her fantasies. I am not. Elizabeth protested, stung. I told her to go to the dinner. I did everything you asked. Did you? Carol said, walking toward her. She was smaller than Elizabeth but radiated an aura of power that made Elizabeth shrink back. Or did you enjoy it? Did you enjoy the attention of the heiress? Did you start to believe this thing between you was real? Elizabeth's silence was her answer. She hadn't realized it until this moment, but Carol was right. A part of her had gotten lost in the fantasy. A part of her had started to believe the soft whispers and stolen kisses. A part of her was falling in love with Claire. Carol saw the realization dawn on Elizabeth's face, and her expression turned to one of pure contempt. How predictable. The poor girl falls for the rich girl. A fairy tale. Do you have any idea how pathetic that is? She said she loves me, Elizabeth whispered, the words a desperate defense. Carol laughed. A short, bark-like sound that held no humor. She doesn't love you. She loves the idea of you. You are her rebellion. You are her pet project. You are it to me, dressed in a maid's uniform. She doesn't love you, Elizabeth. She's using you. Just as I am. The words were brutal, designed to wound, and they found their mark. Elizabeth flinched, the truth of it, or the possibility of it, settling in her stomach like a lead weight. Now, Carol said, her voice turning brisk, all emotion gone. We must undo the damage. The engagement is at risk. I need to get her back in line. And this time you will not fail me. What do you want me to do? You are going to break her heart, Carol said simply. Tonight. I am going to accelerate the plan. This little romance is over. No, Elizabeth said, her voice shaking. I can't. Not now. She's too fragile. It will destroy her. That is the point. Carol hissed. I want her destroyed. I want her broken so I can rebuild her. So I can remove this sickness, from her. She will be devastated, she will cry, and she will run to me. And I will tell her it's all right, that the poor manipulative maid has been sent away, and that Daniel is here to protect her. You're a monster, Elizabeth whispered, repeating her earlier accusation, but this time with the full, horrified understanding of the woman's cruelty. I am a mother. I am protecting my legacy, Carol said. And you are my tool. Now you will go to her room and you will end it. You will tell her it was all a lie. You will tell her you were only in it for the money. You will be as cruel as you possibly can. Make her hate you. And if I don't? Elizabeth asked, a flicker of defiance. Carol smiled, a thin, dangerous smile. Then I will. I will tell her you were my spy from the beginning. I will show her the payment stubs. I will tell her you did it all for cash. And then, after I have destroyed her faith in you, I will call the police. I will tell them you have been stealing from me. Martha has been watching you, you know. She would be delighted to testify that she saw you taking my things. How do you think lesbian lover and thief will play for a poor girl in a court of law? The threat was absolute. It was ruin. Not just for her but for her mother. Elizabeth's shoulders slumped in defeat. The trap was ironclad. There was no escape. What do I say? You'll think of something, Carol said, turning back to the fireplace. You're a practical girl. And make sure she believes it. I want to hear her crying from my room. Elizabeth walked out of the study, her body numb, her mind a screaming void. The whispers of the staff, which had followed her for weeks, were now the loudest sound in the house. Spy. Gold digger. Traitor. They had been right all along. She was exactly what Martha had always thought she was. She walked up the grand staircase. Each step was an agony. She was a lamb walking to the slaughter, only she was also the butcher. She reached Claire's door. She could hear soft music from within. Claire was waiting for her. Waiting for her lover, her confidant, her ally. And she was about to be met by her executioner. Elizabeth raised a trembling hand and knocked on the door. This she knew would be the worst betrayal of all. The door opened and Claire's face lit up. Elizabeth. I was so worried. What did she say? Was she terrible? Come in, come in. Claire was in her nightgown, her hair brushed out. The room was warm and smelled of lavender. She pulled Elizabeth inside, her hands warm and trusting. Whatever it is, we'll face it. I'll tell her I won't marry him. I'll tell her I'll give up everything. I don't care about the money. I just want. Stop, Elizabeth said. Her voice was cold, flat. She pulled her hands from Claire's grasp. Claire froze, the smile fading from her face. Elizabeth, what is it? You're frightening me. Elizabeth's heart was breaking. Every instinct screamed at her to hold Claire, to tell her the truth, to beg for forgiveness. But Carol's threat echoed in her ears. Thief. Ruin. Your mother. He had to do it. He had to be cruel. She dredged up every ounce of bitterness, every feeling of helplessness, and aimed it at the only innocent person in the house. It's over, Claire, she said, not meeting her eyes. Over. Claire's voice was a small, confused whisper. What's over? What are you talking about? This, Elizabeth said, gesturing between them. This game. It's done. Game. Claire repeated, her brow furrowing. It's not a game. I told you. I love you. Elizabeth forced a laugh. It was a harsh, ugly sound. Love? You call this love? You're a child. A rich, spoiled child playing with her new toy. And I'm a maid. You don't love me. You love the idea of slumming it. You love upsetting your mother. Claire recoiled as if she'd been slapped. That's not true. You know it's not. Do I? Elizabeth said, finally meeting her gaze. Her eyes were cold, dead. What did you really think this was? A fairy tale? The poor maid and the lonely heiress ride off into the sunset? Grow up, Claire. But, the kiss. The library. Tonight, you kissed me back, Claire said, tears welling in her eyes. You said. I said what you wanted to hear. Elizabeth snapped, her voice rising. What did you expect? I'm poor. You're rich. Of course I was going to play along. A few kisses, a few whispered secrets. And your mother pays me more in a week than I'd make in a year scrubbing her floors. It was a good deal. The words hung in the air, toxic and heavy. Claire's face crumpled. The tears spilled over, tracing paths down her cheeks. Money? You did this for money? What else? Elizabeth said, her voice dripping with a false cynicism. Your love. Your travels to Paris? That's a dream. Money is real. Your mother understood that. She paid me to be your companion, to keep you happy. And now she's paying me to go away. It was a lie, a distortion of the truth, but it was the lie Carol had ordered. It was the lie that would protect Elizabeth from prison and protect Claire from the knowledge of her mother's full monstrosity. No, Claire whispered, shaking her head in denial. No, my mother, she wouldn't. She said she understood. She understood that you were a problem, Elizabeth said, walking to the door. She couldn't stay in the room a second longer. And I was the solution. And now I'm not. It's that simple. So it was all a lie? Claire's voice was broken, choked with sobs. The library. When you said you were lonely too. When you held my hand by the lake. All of it. Elizabeth paused at the door, her back to Claire. Her heart was a solid block of ice. She had to deliver the final killing blow. Yes, she whispered. All off it. She opened the door and walked out, not looking back. She couldn't bear to see the wreckage she had created. As she pulled the door shut, she heard a sound. Not the crying Carol had predicted. Not a wail of despair. It was the sound of something shattering. Plus, Elizabeth flinched and began to run. She ran down the hallway, past the portraits, down the grand staircase, her own tears blinding her. She ran until she was out the servants' entrance into the cold night air, gulping it in, but it couldn't wash away the filth. She had done it. She had broken Claire. She had performed the ultimate betrayal. She found her way back to her new luxurious room in the guest wing. She packed her few belongings. She took the envelopes of money from under the mattress and stuffed them into her bag. He was a traitor. She may as well be a paid one. She was just about to leave when she saw a small framed photograph on the desk. It was a picture of Claire taken years ago. She was on a horse, smiling, her face free and happy. A face Elizabeth had only seen glimpses of, a face she had now helped to destroy. Suddenly, a new cold thought entered her mind. Carol had been too prepared. Her plan to break Claire was too perfect. The story of paying the maid was too easy. What if Carol had planned this? Not just for a week, but from the beginning? Elizabeth looked at the photograph, then at the elegant empty room. She thought about her first day, how Claire had just appeared. How their paths had crossed so perfectly. She thought about the way Carol had looked at her in the library. Not just with anger, but with recognition. Elizabeth sank onto the bed, her mind racing. She had been a pawn in Carol's game, but what if the game was older and deeper than she knew? What if this wasn't just about a business merger? She looked at her own reflection in the mirror. She was just a poor maid. But as she stared, she noticed something. A detail in her own face. The shape of her eyes. The line of her jaw. It was familiar. She thought back to Martha, the head housekeeper. Martha had hated her on sight. Not just jealousy, but a real deep-seated hatred. As if she'd seen a ghost. A new, terrifying suspicion began to form. This wasn't just a simple story of class and forbidden love. This was something else. Elizabeth stood up. She wasn't leaving. Not yet. She had destroyed Claire's life by following Carol's orders. Now she had to find out why. The betrayal was complete, but the story was not over. Elizabeth did not sleep. The mansion was quiet, the storm of the dinner party and its aftermath having finally settled into a heavy, oppressive stillness. Elizabeth sat on the bed in her room, the bag with the money at her feet, and she thought. She replayed every encounter, every conversation, every look from Carol Blackwood. The recognition. That was the key. Carol hadn't just seen a maid and her daughter. She had seen something else. And Martha, the housekeeper, had seen it too. Elizabeth needed answers. And she knew instinctively that she would not find them in the staff quarters. She had to go back to the one place that held all the family's secrets. Carol's study. It was past 3 a.m. The house was asleep. Elizabeth slipped out of her room, her shoes in her hand. She moved silently through the darkened corridors, a ghost in her own right. The house, which had once felt so intimidating, now felt like a puzzle she needed to solve. The study door was unlocked. Carol was arrogant. She didn't believe a poor maid would ever dare to cross her. Elizabeth slipped inside, closing the door behind her. The room was dark, but the moonlight streaming through the large window was enough. She didn't turn on a light. She went straight to the massive desk. She wasn't looking for money or business papers. She was looking for something personal. In the bottom drawer, tucked beneath old financial ledgers, she found it. A small leather-bound album. It was old, the leather cracked. She opened it. The first few pages were pictures of a young Carol before she was a Blackwood. She was smiling, her face softer, almost happy. There were pictures of her in college on a boat. And in almost every picture she was with another woman. Elizabeth's breath caught. The woman was young with dark, intelligent eyes and a rebellious smile. She was beautiful. And she looked. Elizabeth ran to the mirror above the fireplace, holding the album open. She stared at the woman in the photograph and then at her own reflection. It was her mother. Not just a resemblance. It was her mother, 30 years younger. Elizabeth sank into the chair, the album falling into her lap. Her mind was spinning, trying to process the impossible. Her mother, who was now a frail, sick woman living in a tiny apartment, had known Carol Blackwood. Not just known her. They had been. Elizabeth flipped through the pages. Pictures of them holding hands. A picture of them at a protest, arms linked. A picture of them heads close together, sharing a secret. The last picture was of her mother alone, and under it, a single word written in Carol's elegant script. Betrayal. She was my mother's lover. Elizabeth whispered the words into the empty room. This whole thing, it wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't random. Carol hadn't just hired her. She had found her. The shocking reaction in the library, it wasn't shock at a lesbian kiss. It was the shock of seeing a ghost. Carol had seen the daughter of her long-lost, betrayed love, kissing her daughter. It was history horrifically repeating itself. She used me. Elizabeth realized the full monstrous weight of the plan crashing down on her. Carol had sought her out, this poor maid, and brought her into the house. She had orchestrated the meetings with Claire. She had known Claire was lonely and rebellious. She had known Elizabeth was poor and desperate. She had set the entire stage. What? Revenge? A sick experiment? To see if Elizabeth was like her mother? To see if she could be bought? The money. The envelopes. They weren't just payment. They were a test. A test Elizabeth had failed by taking them. In Carol's eyes, Elizabeth had proven she was just like the woman who had betrayed her. But, had her mother betrayed Carol? Elizabeth thought of her mother, a woman who had worked her fingers to the bone, who had always been so sad, so tired. A woman who had never ever spoken of her past. Elizabeth looked back at the album. Betrayal. What if the betrayal was the other way around? She frantically searched the desk. Tucked in the back of the same drawer was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. She opened one. The handwriting was her mother's. My dearest C, you must not do this. My family will not stand for it. They are offering me a way out, a small fund if I promise to never see you again. I don't want to. I love you. But they are threatening you. They say they will ruin your family, your father's business. I cannot let that happen. Please understand. This is not a betrayal. This is a sacrifice. Another letter from Carol. You call it a sacrifice? I call it cowardice. You chose money over me. You are weak. You are a traitor. I will never forgive you. And a final one from Elizabeth's mother, tear-stained and crumpled. They forced my hand. I am with child. Not yours. They arranged it. A man. I'm so sorry. Forget me. Elizabeth dropped the letters. She felt sick. Her mother hadn't been pregnant with her. That was a different, earlier tragedy. But the story was clear. Carol's wealthy family had threatened Elizabeth's mother's family. Her mother, to save Carol, had left her. And Carol, in her grief and rage, had twisted it. She believed her love had chosen money and weakness over her. And now, decades later, she had found the daughter. Her daughter. No, not her daughter. Elizabeth was born years later. But the daughter of her love. She had brought Elizabeth into her house to prove a point. To prove that blood runs true. To prove that the daughter would be just as weak, just as easily bought as she thought the mother had been. The entire lesbian romance with Claire. It was a sick, elaborate stage play. Carol had wanted Elizabeth to take the money. She had wanted her to betray Claire. She was reenacting her own past, but this time she was the one in control. She was the one paying for the betrayal. Elizabeth's grief for Claire was suddenly eclipsed by a cold, hard rage. She had been a puppet. Claire had been a puppet. Even her own mother all those years ago had been a puppet. All for Carol Blackwood's twisted need for revenge. The sound of a door opening downstairs. The first of the staff, the cook, was arriving for the morning. Elizabeth carefully put the letters and the album back, exactly as she had found them. She walked out of the study, her mind clear for the first time. The game was not over. She knew the truth. She knew the why. The betrayal was not hers. It was Carol's. And she was about to expose it. Elizabeth found Claire in the conservatory. She had been there all night, huddled on a stone bench, wrapped in a thin blanket. The shattered remains of a terracotta pot lay on the floor. She had apparently spent her grief throwing things. Her eyes were red and swollen, her face pale. When she saw Elizabeth, her expression hardened. It was not the look of a broken child. It was the look of someone who had cried all the tears she had and was left with nothing but cold, hard anger. What do you want? Claire hissed. Come to collect your final payment? Or just to see the damage? Claire, you have to listen to me, Elizabeth said, her voice low and urgent. I'm not. I didn't. Save it, Claire snapped, standing up. You were right. It was a game. I was a fool. A spoiled, stupid fool. Well, congratulations, Elizabeth. You won. You got your money. Now get out. It was a game, Claire, Elizabeth said, taking a step closer. But we weren't the players. We were the pieces. Your mother. She's been playing us both. Claire scoffed. Oh, so now it's her fault? You're going to blame my mother for the fact that you're a cold-hearted backstabbing. My mother was her lover, Elizabeth interrupted. The words hung in the sun-drenched, cold air of the conservatory. Claire froze, her mouth slightly open. What? My mother. 30 years ago. Your mother. They were in love. Your mother's family, they tore them apart. They paid my mother to leave to protect your mother. But your mother thought, she believes, my mother betrayed her for money. Claire just stared, her mind clearly struggling to grasp the information. Your mother didn't just hire me, Claire, Elizabeth continued, her voice gaining strength. She found me. She brought me here. She set this all up. She wanted us to be together. Why? Claire whispered, sinking back onto the bench. Why would she do that? To prove a point, Elizabeth said, her voice thick with disgust. To prove that I was weak like she thought my mother was. To prove I could be bought. She wanted me to take her money. She wanted me to betray you. She was reliving her own past, but this time she was in control. The money, Claire said, her eyes widening in horror. The money she gave you, the promotion. It was a test. The whole thing. The kiss in the library, her shocking reaction. It was all a lie. She wasn't shocked. She was pleased. Her plan was working. Claire looked up, her eyes no longer angry, but filled with a dawning, sickening understanding. The dinner. My rebellion. She wanted me to rebel so she could order you to break my heart. Yes, Elizabeth said. She needed to prove that I, the daughter of her traitor, would also betray for money. And when I took the envelopes, I proved her right. But the letters I found, Claire said, her hand going to her pocket. After you left, I went to her study. I was so angry. I was looking for, I don't know, and I found them. Letters. From a woman. To my mother. Elizabeth's heart stopped. What did they say? They were love letters. But they were angry. The woman was accusing my mother of being a coward. Of choosing her family's money over her. The woman's name was Amelia. That's my mother's name, Elizabeth breathed. I thought my mother was the one who was betrayed, Claire said, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. I thought this Amelia was a gold digger. My mother told me. She told me a story once about a friend who betrayed her. She lied, Claire, Elizabeth said, kneeling in front of her. I found the other letters. The ones from my mother. Your mother's family threatened her. They threatened to ruin your mother. My mother left to save her. It wasn't a betrayal. It was a sacrifice. The two women stared at each other. The maid and the heiress. The daughters of a tragic 30-year-old story, brought together by the very person who had been at its center. She's a monster, Claire whispered, the words a hollow echo of Elizabeth's own realization. She didn't just break my heart. She engineered it. She used you. She used me. She used her own trauma to ties us. A new, hard resolve settled in Claire's features. The spoiled, lonely girl was gone. The woman who remained was cold, focused, and furious. She will not get away with this, Claire said, her voice low and dangerous. What are we going to do? Elizabeth asked. Claire stood up. She wiped the last of her tears from her face. Last night I was her puppet. Today, I cut the strings. She looked at Elizabeth, a true ally. She wanted a betrayal? We'll give her one. But this one will be real. And it won't be ours. The whole mansion was about to be shocked again. But this time it wouldn't be by a lesbian kiss, or a shocking reaction. It would be by the truth. The plan was simple and it was terrifying. It was Claire's plan, born of a lifetime of observing her mother's tactics. My mother's power, Claire explained, her voice steady, comes from control. She controls the narrative. She controls the people. We take away her control and she has nothing. The narrative Carol had built was simple. The poor, manipulative maid, Elizabeth, had seduced the innocent, unstable heiress, Claire, for money, and the strong, protective mother, Carol, had stepped in to save her daughter. Their new narrative was the truth. But how? Elizabeth asked. It's our word against hers. She's Carol Blackwood. I'm a fired maid. And you're her daughter. She'll say you're hysterical. She would, Claire agreed. If we confront her privately. But we're not going to. We're going to do it publicly. In the one place she is most vulnerable. The charity gala, Elizabeth breathed, remembering the posters she had seen all over the house. Exactly, Claire said, a grim smile on her face. My mother's favorite night of the year. Not because she cares about the charity, but because it's when the entire city comes to kiss her ring. Reporters, business rivals, politicians. Everyone. She'll be on her stage accepting an award for Philanthropist of the Year. And that, Claire said, her eyes glinting, is when we'll change the narrative. The gala was in 2 days. It gave them very little time. First, Claire said, we need evidence. I can't get back into the study, Elizabeth said. She'll have it locked now. We don't need to, Claire said. I've been in that study my whole life. I know where she keeps the real files. While Elizabeth stood watch, her heart pounding at every distant footstep, Claire went not to the desk but to the grand, built-in bookcase. She pressed a sequence of books and a section of the shelving clicked open, revealing a small, hidden safe. She showed me this when I was 10, Claire said, her fingers working the combination. She said it was where she kept the family's security. She thought it would impress me. The safe opened. Inside were not jewels or cash but files. And a small wooden box. Claire pulled out the box. Inside were the letters. All of them. Carol's letters and her mother's. Carol had kept them, a private shrine to her own grievance. This is it, Elizabeth whispered, touching the faded ink of her mother's handwriting. And this, Claire said, pulling out a thick file. Is this? It was a private investigator's report. On Elizabeth. It had everything. Her birth certificate. Her mother's medical history. Their financial struggles. And a start date, circled in red ink, 3 weeks before Elizabeth had even applied for the job at the mansion. She hunted you, Claire said, her voice shaking with rage. She did, Elizabeth said, her own anger a cold, hard stone in her gut. Now let's make sure everyone else knows it. They spent the next 48 hours in a flurry of secret activity. Claire, using her own trust fund which her mother couldn't touch, made arrangements. She called a lawyer. She also made another, more surprising call. Martha, Elizabeth said, shocked as the head housekeeper entered Claire's room, her face a mask of confusion. Miss Claire, you're not supposed to be with her, Martha stammered, looking at Elizabeth with her usual contempt. Martha, Claire said, her voice pure authority, how long have you worked for my mother? 32 years, Mississippi. Since before you were born. And did you know her before? Did you know a woman named Amelia? Martha's face went white. That's not my place, Mississippi. My mother hired Elizabeth, Amelia's daughter, to come into this house and pretend to fall in love with me, just so my mother could reenact her own failed romance and then pay Elizabeth to betray me, Claire said, all in one breath. Martha looked like she was going to faint. Miss, that's a terrible thing to say. It's the truth, Elizabeth said, holding out the investigator's report. She's been paying me. Not to be with Claire but to spy on her. And then to break her heart. She held my own mother's housing over my head. Martha's gaze flickered from the report to Elizabeth, and her famous contempt softened just slightly. I knew she was a friend. From the before time. When I saw you, she said to Elizabeth, I thought you'd come here to make trouble. Like your mother. My mother made no trouble, Elizabeth said. She was the one who got troubled. Your boss, our boss, is a tyrant. And she's using all of us. Martha was a proud woman, but she was not a stupid one. She had worked for Carol for 3 decades. She had seen the woman's coldness, her cruelty. This made a terrible, awful kind of sense. What do you want from me? Martha whispered. My mother is about to be named Philanthropist of the Year, Claire said. And when she accepts that award, I want the lights to go down and I want a microphone to be live. Your nephew, he works for the event's A/V team, doesn't he? Martha's eyes widened. She was being asked to betray the woman she had served for 30 years. She threatened my job last week, Martha said, her voice thin, because the silver wasn't polished to her liking. After 32 years. She looked at Claire, then at Elizabeth. She made her decision. The microphone in the main lectern is always live, Martha said. And my nephew, he's always been very loyal to me. The grand ballroom was a sea of jewels and expensive suits. The city's elite had gathered for the annual philanthropic gala, the crowning event of the social season. At the head table sat Carol Blackwood, radiant in a dark green gown, accepting the congratulations of senators and CEOs. She was at the apex of her power. She had barely noticed Claire's presence. Her daughter, dressed in a stunning simple black dress, had been quiet and compliant all evening. Carol assumed her plan had worked. Claire was broken and would soon be malleable. She had even seen Elizabeth, the fired maid, earlier, but dismissed her as a pathetic moth drawn to the flame. She was no threat. The time came. The chairman of the foundation stood up. And now, he boomed, to present our highest honor, the Philanthropist of the Year award, to a woman whose generosity knows no bounds. Mrs. Carol Blackwood. The room erupted in applause. Carol stood, beaming, and walked to the lectern. She accepted the heavy crystal award, her smile perfect. Thank you, she began, her voice smooth and practiced. Thank you. I am so humbled. I have always believed that those of us who have been blessed must give back. We must be a beacon. We must be truthful. As she spoke, Claire rose from her seat and walked calmly toward the stage. A security guard moved to intercept her, but she just smiled and said, I'm just going to congratulate my mother. And he, recognizing the heiress, stepped aside. Elizabeth moved at the same time from the back of the room, walking steadily down the center aisle. Carol saw Claire approaching, her smile tightening. My daughter Claire, she said into the microphone. So lovely to see you taking an interest, darling. Claire reached the stage. But she didn't hug her mother. She walked to the second, inactive microphone at the lectern. In the A/V booth, Martha's nephew saw her signal and with the flip of a switch made the microphone live. Thank you, Mother, Claire's voice boomed across the silent ballroom. It's wonderful to be here. And to see you honored for your truthfulness. Carol's smile froze. Claire, darling, what are you? I just have one question for you, Mother, Claire said, her voice clear and strong. When you speak of giving back, does that include the money you paid to a private investigator to hunt down the daughter of your long-lost lover? A collective gasp went through the room. The reporters at the press table suddenly sat up, their cameras flashing. Claire, you are hysterical, Carol hissed, trying to grab the microphone. Am I? Claire said, stepping back. Or am I just repeating what I read in your files? The files on Amelia, your first love? The woman you believe betrayed you. From the center aisle, a new voice. She didn't betray you. Elizabeth was at the foot of the stage. All eyes turned to her. She was just a girl in a simple dress, but her voice was powerful. My mother, Amelia, didn't betray you, Carol, Elizabeth called out. She left you to save you. Your family threatened to ruin you. She sacrificed her own happiness for yours. And how did you repay her? Decades later? By hunting me down. Carol's face was white. Security. Get this. This trespasser. Out of here. You hired me. Elizabeth shouted, holding up the letters. Or copies of them. Claire's lawyer had been busy. You hired me, a poor maid. You put me in your house and you staged an entire romance. You encouraged me to kiss your daughter. The room was in chaos. A poor maid's lesbian kissing. A reporter whispered, scribbling frantically. You paid me to be her spy. Elizabeth continued. And then, you paid me to betray her. To break her heart. All to satisfy your own twisted 30-year-old vendetta. It's a lie. Carol screamed, her mask of perfection shattering. She's a liar. A thief. Then what is this? Claire said, and she nodded to the A/V booth. The lights went down. The large screens on either side of the stage, which had been showing a tasteful montage of Carol's charity, flickered. And then the investigator's report appeared. Page after page. Elizabeth's photo. Her mother's. The payment stubs which Carol had so foolishly documented. And then the letters. My dear C. They are threatening you. I call it cowardice. The room was silent, reading the words of a 30-year-old tragedy, and the new cruel one that had been built on its foundation. Carol stared at the screen, her mouth open. This was the real shocking reaction. Not the calm, cold matriarch. This was the reaction of a woman who had lost control. She lunged at Claire, her face a mask of pure rage. You brat. I gave you everything. She didn't get to her. Elizabeth was there, standing between them. And then security was there, pulling Carol back. The whole mansion is here, Claire said, her voice soft but carrying on the microphone. The whole city. And they've all seen the truth. Your reaction, it shocked everyone. The chairman of the foundation, his face pale, walked to the lectern. He tapped the microphone. This gala is over. Carol, defeated, was led off the stage, her Philanthropist of the Year award left forgotten on the lectern. She looked small. Elizabeth and Claire stood on the stage, the lights coming up. They looked at each other. They were not lovers. They were not a maid and an heiress. They were survivors. The lesbian betrayal had been a lie, a script written by a rich mother. But the alliance, the one between two women who had been used and discarded, that was real. They didn't know what the future held. But as they walked off the stage together, leaving the whispers and the flashing cameras behind, they knew one thing. They were finally free.